So I am in the mood to record some videos. And I said to myself, being that I have the energy to do so, the creativity to do so, why not? So in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience as a quote unquote stepmom. This is basically like an update and where I am today. So here's an update on some things that I learned. First things first is you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is when you are stepping into an already created family, you are going to have some very awkward, uncomfortable moments because you are the outsider. And that is something that I had to accept, right? Being the outside person, I'm not a part of the family. I wasn't there to lay down the foundation. And how I learned to navigate the uncomfortability or feeling like an outsider, I put my energy into other areas of my life that need improvement or focus. For example, I decided to go back to school to obtain a master's degree in a field that I enjoy, which is developmental psychology. I have started to journal more and read more. So taking my focus off of this whole idea of family and literally focusing on myself. The second thing I had to learn is boundaries, 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 boundaries. I think that when you go into an already created family, you have this whole idea of how you hope things will be. And then certain events will take place, and then you realize, like, no, that's not going to happen, right? So I had to learn to like speak up and actually set boundaries and not overcompensate just to be accepted, especially when it came to the child. I remember when I first moved in, I had this whole idea of, girls' night once a month, going places together, creating this bond. But I didn't take into consideration where her mental was because you're not always going to be accepted by the child. Sometimes children can be very rebellious, children can be jealous, children can just not want an outside person into the mix with their biological parent and them. I think jealousy is a very low vibrational um, attitude to have. When I was younger, I never had jealousy for my father's partner. My mom and my dad split when we were young, and I never had jealousy for my father's wife. I seen her as like an extended part of him. Like I have to treat her with respect because she is an adult. She is part of the family. And I did a lot of reflecting, and I can remember times where I'm pretty sure she felt uncomfortable being around my father's side of the family. But I can say definitely that her side of the family never treated me and my siblings as the outside people. Like when we went to her mom's house, they were all loving and welcoming, and it didn't feel out of place. It didn't feel awkward. And I don't know. I think it's a generational thing because my dad is an older guy. My dad is in his 60s. And my dad had me when he was in his 30s. So I think that when you have children at a very young age, a lot of the times the parent tries to be the friend of the child and they lack parenting skills. I don't believe in having children at a young age. That was one of the main reasons why I decided to like get on birth control, because I knew I didn't want to have a baby at a young age. I knew that I didn't have the maturity, and I feel like I'm going all over with this video. But to get back to my point is I had to learn to accept certain things for what they was. And I learned that if what the child is doing doesn't impact my mental, if what the child is doing doesn't impact what's going on in the house, the rhythm of the house, then I don't even say anything at this point. Because biological parents, a lot of them who have been like divorced or have experienced some type of trauma, such as death, they parent out of guilt. And the child knows this, right? Oh, uh, mom or dad died, so I know I can get away with certain things with dad because we have this loyalty bond, right? We've both experienced death. We've both experienced this divorce. So the parent begins to parent out of guilt. And children can be very, very manipulative, very, very manipulative, especially when you have a child that is an only child, right? And sees the outside person as a threat. Another thing that I had to learn is parenting styles definitely play a major part in how a child is raised. Also, learn to allow him to parent in the best way that he sees fit. And it has been a journey. It has not been easy. It has not been easy at all. It takes a certain level of maturity. It takes a certain level of wisdom to understand the dynamic that you're in when it comes to going into a blended family. It takes a level of not my circus, not my monkey, which just means not my child, not my issue. And let me say this, if you don't have a partner that's on the same page as you, that understands that what you're trying to bring to the table, bring to the house, um, is going to be beneficial for not just your relationship with your partner, but the relationship with the child, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You're going to have a lot of tugging, a lot of conflict, a lot of dysfunction. And when children can play one parent against another adult, it definitely will not survive. It definitely will not survive. Being undermined was something that I had to deal with, right? So once I realized that, we may not be on the same page when it comes to setting rules and actually sticking to the rules and being consistent. And I had to talk about how I felt when it came to like being undermined in front of a child. People should not have children at a young age. And I'm going to go back to this because I feel like the older you are, the more mature you are, the more wisdom you have. I also understand that people's childhood play a big part in how they parent. People's childhood definitely, definitely plays a big part in how they parent. My parents didn't have to tell me what to do or when to do it once I got to a certain age. I just automatically just did it. I also had to take into consideration that everybody is raised differently. But when you're going into a blended family, and this is for anybody, whether man or woman, set boundaries, right? Set boundaries, especially if you and your partner can't see eye to eye on certain things, are not in agreement with certain things, are not in alignment with certain things. Set boundaries. Set boundaries for your mental, set boundaries for your spiritual. My boundaries consist of doing what I can do, but not feeling like I'm obligated to do it. And don't let people gaslight you and say things like, well, we're a package deal. Think biological parents, biological single parents, period, have a hard time understanding that your spouse and your child are not on the same playing field. You cannot treat your child the same way you treat your spouse, just like you can't treat your spouse the same way you treat your child. It's a roller coaster, y'all. Some days are good, and some days I'm just like, what am I doing here? Being in certain situations, you will now understand, you would then understand that there's a reason why people avoid certain situations, because it could be stressful, it could be hurtful, right? Because when you have too many hands in a pot trying to control certain things, when you have a parent who has allowed his child to feel as if the child runs the household, it can create chaos. It can create chaos. I got myself back in therapy, and one of the things that my therapist told me is that I had to switch my mindset. I had to get rid of certain things in order for things to actually thrive. And one of the things he said is, you are not her parent. She doesn't see you as a parent, she sees you as an outsider. And in order for the relationship to thrive, your only concern should be keeping it cordial and keeping it respectful with the child. When the child begins to disrespect you, then that's when you have to set boundaries with the father. And if you have an open conversation with both the father and the child and nothing changes, you have to do what's best for you. And yeah, your partner might be upset, and yes, the child might be upset, but you can't do for a child that's not yours if the child doesn't respect you. That's how I feel. There are days where I'm just like, this just isn't for me. And then there are days where everything seems to be flowing nice. Another thing I'm going to say is, it is up to the biological parent to try and build a relationship between the child and the partner. It is not the responsibility of the person that's stepping into the family to try to create a relationship with the child, especially if the child doesn't want the relationship. Yeah, and that's where I'm currently at. um, Putting my energy back into myself, and just, you know, going back to like nature. If you look at like the animal kingdom, there's no such thing as step bear. There's no such thing as step rabbit. There's no such thing as a step deer, right? And even in some animal kingdoms, the male animal will actually kill off any of the previous babies from a previous male, if that makes sense. So that's how you know that, like, sometimes when you are in a blended family, you're not really operating the way that you should. And I've learned to just accept things for what they are, work on areas that I can change. But if I can't change it, I'm not stressing myself, and just continue to be a good person, right? I never want her to look back and say, oh, I wasn't a good person to her. I do want her to understand that you should just treat people with respect, especially when people care about you. Yeah, it's tough. It's definitely tough. Do I recommend it? I don't recommend it. If this relationship doesn't work out for me, I would never date a man with a child. I would never do it. You find yourself a lot of the times questioning yourself. You find yourself wanting certain things that your partner may not be able to give you because he has a child. You find yourself wanting to have certain experiences, and they may not be as exciting as you would hope they would be because he may have experienced this experience already. Um, yeah, you just got to know yourself. You got to know yourself. You got to know what you want. Don't lose yourself in relationships. Never ever lose yourself in a relationship. Continue to work on yourself, whether that is you wanting to run a business or um, elevate in your career, elevate in your education, whether that is you want to travel the world. Like, don't lose yourself in other people's situation. People have made choices when they were younger that currently impact their adulthood. And because I believe that I was very wise at a very early age, there were a lot of situations as a child, as a young adult, that I avoided because I knew that I just wanted like happiness. I knew I wanted peace as an adult. I knew that I didn't want extra baggage. I knew that. I knew that I knew my worth. I know my worth. I continue to know my worth. And every day is a new day to make better choices, right? Every day is another day to be a better person. And it's not perfect. But an older lady said to me, you're placed in people's lives for a reason. You're placed in people's lives for a reason. And sometimes you don't even know what the reason is. Sometimes you're just like questioning everything. Like, why did I put myself in this situation? But when the good outweighs the bad, then it's worth it. But when the bad is outweighing the good, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So those are some things that I learned. It's a journey. It's a journey, but you live and you learn. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Peace. That you are